Perkins Coie partner Ron McIntyre has worked on scores of civil cases involving plane crashes, asbestos claims, and personal injury over his 27-year career. But it's his pro bono representation of Sara Kruzan that stands out.
You know, two of the happiest days of my life were, sorry about this. I mean, besides the birth of my children and my marriage, I mean, of my professional life, I should say, was the day we did her parole hearing, and the parole board announced that they were going to advocate for, for her to be released. And then the other was the day I found out she got out.
Kruzan, who lived in San Diego for a time when she was a child, killed her pimp, Gigi Howard, in Riverside when she was 16. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Kruzan met Howard at 11. He raped her at 13 and forced her into prostitution. Perkins Coie took on the Kruzan case in 2007.
This pimp had targeted her, taken advantage of her, groomed her for prostitution, put her out on the streets, and when she finally snapped after years of abuse and shot him, she was sentenced to her entire life in prison and would never have the opportunity to come before a parole board. So to me, it was so obvious, and I felt sort of an instant connection to her story.
Melora Garrison was a new Perkins Coie associate at the time. She was one of 6 lawyers Perkins Coie assembled to work on the case. McIntyre says their first meeting with Kruzan at the women's prison in Chowchilla lasted 5 hours and was emotional.
For me, I think it was because I have daughters of my own, and I thought, close to her age, or who were her age at the time of her crime, and I thought, but for other circumstances, they could be here.
As they exited the prison, Garrison says the stakes hit her.
I had this moment of crushing anxiety, what if we invest all this time and all these resources and get her hopes up, 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 and we don't get her out?
Optimism quickly replaced fear. Even though Kruzan was given a life sentence in 1995, McIntyre says the law allowed the court to give her the possibility of parole because she was a minor.
The sentencing error was pretty egregious, and no one in that courtroom knew what the law was as to the law that governed her sentencing, given her age.
The lawyers also believed they had grounds for a new trial. Garrison says Kruzan's defense lawyer never introduced evidence about the effects of her abusive childhood or that she had been a victim of violence by her pimp. Kruzan was the only person he put on the stand, and she was medicated.
The jury had no idea, other than a single mention of one night of prostitution, that she had been trafficked by this man throughout her life.
Nonetheless, over the next 7 years, efforts to get the case reopened were rejected by the Riverside Trial Court and Appeals Court. A clemency petition to former Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger failed, but he did commute her sentence to life with the possibility of parole. The California Supreme Court sent the case back to Riverside. Garrison says the failures never hampered their faith, and Kruzan served as a huge motivator.
As a lawyer, you kind of think you either do good work and get the result that you want, or you don't. But I came to learn that this constant optimism and belief was actually really important to the outcome.
Ultimately, Kruzan's lawyers struck a deal with Riverside prosecutors to reduce her first-degree murder conviction to second-degree murder. She was freed for time served. Garrison says Kruzan's case epitomized what she had always thought being a lawyer meant.
Working on this case, I think, is just a really good example of how supremely important it is for lawyers to do public interest, pro bono work.
All told, Perkins Coie donated $800,000 in legal services and spent $120,000 of its own money to win freedom for Kruzan. McIntyre says the experience made him even more cynical about the criminal justice system.
If a fraction of that had been put in at the front end, where she was originally tried and where there had been the proper preparation, if there had been a degree of reasonableness in the initial trial, but from all sides, not just on the defense side, that I think she would have ended up in the same place where we ended up all these years later, but with much less having been wasted in the meantime.
Now that the case is over and Kruzan is free and making plans to be a social worker, the lawyers remain connected to her.
Now it's fatherly concern, I guess, at this point. You know, I want her to make the most of this opportunity.
Amita Sharma, KPBS News.